In the end, the appraiser is the analyst. The appraiser makes the decision on if sales are comps.
Originating from deep inside the Rocky Mountains, transported through the power of the internet, and arriving inside your tiny earbuds. It's the Appraiser Coach Podcast, helping appraisers increase their efficiency, quality, and make more money. Here's the guy who makes it his life's mission to create value for real estate appraisers nationwide. Your host and the Appraiser Coach, Justin Harris.
And welcome back to the program, everybody. Going to handle a question that I get frequently that I know we all deal with on a regular basis, and that is, how do you handle those crazy realtors and those calls of disdain when somehow the value does not equal the contract price? I want to get into that today and give you a few ideas of how you might handle that kind of a phone call as we roll through the program today. First, I want to pause here and remind you that we're sponsored by Working RE Magazine. Just this morning, woke up to a great article from Isaac Peck, the editor of Working RE Magazine. And, it's a great way to start my day, honestly. It was great information about kind of some of the future of what the appraisal world looks like. If you want to sign up for that free newsletter, it is workingre.com. Again, workingre.com. Sponsored by Alamode Software. Alamode, of course, is the software that I have been using for over 2 decades, almost 3 decades now, folks. And they have been in business almost 4 decades. And they are helping and leading the pack when it comes to appraisal software, appraisal writing software. So many tools for you to use. Alamode.com. It's ALAMODE.com. And of course, DataMaster, saving appraisers time, saving appraisers money, about 40 minutes on every report that you do. Add that up, folks. Think about the amount of reports that you do in a month and times that by the savings of being a DataMaster family member. DatamasterUSA.com, DatamasterUSA.com. All right, folks, we're going to talk about that inevitable call. First of all, let's talk about whether you make that call yourself or whether you wait for that call to come in. I've been back and forth on this. It's something we've talked about here on the podcast in the past. I can tell you where I land now, and I've been on both sides of this, and that is when I see that there is a contract and I see that it's viable on both sides. It looks like an arm's length transaction. Let's say that the purchase price is $500,000 for a property, and no matter which way I look at it, I can only see the market support of around, $480 for that property. The question is, do you wrap it up? Do you send it in? What do you do? I can tell you in the past, I have waffled back and forth, and here's why. In the past, in the beginning, it was always my responsibility, I felt, to reach out to the realtor and just say, hey, I just want to let you know what I'm running into. Open up the opportunity for them to possibly provide some information to you without stepping over, of course, the bounds of confidentiality, without stepping over the bounds of what's appropriate and what's not. But I would usually pick up the phone and either call the listing or the selling agent and just have a talk. And just, again, not going into details about what comps I've used and what adjustments I've made and that kind of thing. But hey, just want to let you know I'm working on this appraisal. Your purchase price looks like it's about $500,000. I can tell you that, I don't see the support in the market for that. Well, where are you coming in at? Well, I can't really reveal that, but I can tell you that it is lower than the contract price. And the reason I'm calling you is, first of all, as a courtesy. Second of all, to be able to get some feedback from you on where, especially if you're talking to the listing agent, where did you come up with your price? Where in the market have you found support that maybe I haven't seen? Maybe you know some information that I don't know, some pocket listings or some other things that might be out there. By the way, folks, just as a side note, we are a non-disclosure state in the 3 states that I work in, and that does make a difference, by the way. And so reaching out to them in the past has been kind of what I approached. Now, I will tell you, there's a period of time that I backed off from that, and here's why. It seemed to me, in fact, I remember having a staff meeting with my other appraisers, and I sat down and I said, listen, the whole purpose of doing this really is kind of a courtesy. It's a little bit of a CYA so that they don't, get shocked, if you will, when they open up that appraisal. But it's also a little bit of, hey, maybe we did miss something. Maybe we are human and we skipped over something. And the search that we did, or the searches, as the case may be, that we did, missed some information that might be out there. But here's the thing. I can tell you with all accuracy that by and large, and I'm talking not just 9 times out of 10, but 95, 96, 98% of the time, right? Of 100 calls that we made, maybe, and this is really a stretch, maybe one or two of them might give us some information that we didn't know previously, right? I can tell you that the large majority of the time it was a complete, if my purpose was to find other information, right? If that was my sole purpose, it was a complete and utter waste of time to go down that road. Now, if my purpose was to possibly get more information and a secondary purpose was just as a courtesy, again, a CYA, so that they're not completely shocked when they open up that appraisal, well, I guess we accomplished that. But I will tell you what happened 9 times out of the 10 when I called them. I would let them know, listen, there's a lot I can't reveal on this call. There's a lot of confidential information that I can't talk to you about because you're not the client. But I can tell you this, that the data that I'm seeing is not supporting the contract price. And I'm reaching out to you as a courtesy, number one. And number two, to find out if there's some information. Inevitably, they would say, well, where are you coming in at? Well, great question. Again, let me reiterate, there's a lot of stuff I can't answer, which includes that question, but I can tell you that it's not coming in at purchase price. And then inevitably, the next question is, well, how close are you? As if that's a different question than the first question that they asked, right? You've all been there. And it got so frustrating, it sometimes turned in almost to a shouting match. Them demanding that you share that information. What comps have you used? What adjustments have you made? What search did you do? I'm sorry, I can't reveal any of that. I really apologize. Again, that's not the purpose of the phone call today. Purpose of the phone call is to give you a heads up, number one. Number two, to get any, well, how am I supposed to give you information if I don't know what information you already have? That's a great question. Honestly, that's a really good question. Unfortunately, I cannot give you the answer to what you're looking for, but again, trying to call you as a courtesy, hoping to get some information, blah, 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 blah. And it was this circular thing over and over again. And honestly, I sat down in the staff meeting and I said, guys, this almost seems counterintuitive. This almost seems like if our purpose is to maintain good relationships with the realtors, if our purpose is to not give them sticker shock when they open up the appraisal, if our purpose is to be courteous and kind and professional by calling them, we are missing the mark because these phone calls consistently turn into a negative experience. And we stopped doing it. We stopped doing it for a long period of time where we would just wrap up the report. We would send it in and let the chips fall where they may. Now, did that bring some angry phone calls sometimes? Why didn't you call me? Why didn't you give me an opportunity? Yes, it did. But I'll be honest with you, they were far fewer than when we were making that call and being proactive, right? Now, I switched my brain. I switched my business model here a few years ago. And I want to share with you why when we get back from the break. I want to first pause and remind you that we are sponsored by some really, really good companies out there, folks. If you talk about efficiencies, technology, groups and software that will save you time and save you money, folks, I'm telling you, DataMaster is at the top of the pile. Here's why. DataMaster is helping appraisers to save 30 to 60 minutes. That's a half hour to an hour on every report, every appraisal that you do. Why? Because it takes data that you've picked. It doesn't pick the data for you, right? It doesn't keep you out of the loop. You still get to be the appraiser, right? But it takes data that you've picked and puts it into the report in the proper fields, in the proper way that needs to be done so that you can focus on the important parts, not the data entry, not the mundane typing and typing and typing, but focus on analytics, focus on market research, focus on what is important when you're running an appraisal business. That's what DataMaster will do for you. Check them out by going to their website and find out if they're in your area. DatamasterUSA.com. DataMaster, you've got to put USA at the end of that. DatamasterUSA.com. Alamode, of course, with all of their tools, is saving appraisers time as well. In fact, I just sat down today with one of my new colleagues, a new appraiser in my office, and we went through some of the standardizations that we use in our office. Now, this is an appraiser who's been in business many years. He's used mobile for many years, but we do it a little bit different in our office than he's done it in his. So we sat down to get together in my home office, and we went through quick lists, and we went through some of the ways that we use the sketch to double click. This is all in mobile, that we double click on the rooms so that they're self-labeled, and some of the things, the tips and tricks that we use in our office to make things consistent. And folks, every time I do that, I just think, wow, this is a cool software. It really is amazing the way that they can save appraisers time. Check them out by either dialing them up on the internet at alamode.com or pick up the phone, call them, talk to a real live person at alamode.com. Finally, we're sponsored by Working RE Magazine. I told you I woke up this morning to about 15 emails. That's about normal. Typically in a morning, and by the way, you've heard me talk about inbox zero in the past. I love getting to know emails every single day, but I woke up to about 12 to 15 this morning. One of them was Working RE Magazine. Now, I'll be honest with you, I did not have time to read Working RE Magazine right away. I took care of all of the other emails first, and then I circled back to it. But it was a great interview that they had Isaac Peck in there about the future of appraisals and the direction that we are going. Great information that was real, that was accurate. Loved it. That's what Working RE gives you for free, folks. All you have to do is sign up for their blog by going to workingre.com. Let me give that to you one more time. It's workingre.com. All right, welcome back to the program. Dustin Harris hanging out with you. By the way, shout out to Stephen Varga, a good friend of mine, an appraiser, an SRA, by the way, who brought this up. He said, hey, Dustin, a good topic. Why don't you, on your podcast, handle realtor calls or customer calls when appraisal does not support the sales price? Great topic. Thank you, Stephen, for reaching out to me and making this suggestion. And that's what we're talking about today. What does that look like for you? I told you before the break that I've kind of waffled back and forth as to whether or not to even make these calls. And I will tell you, in the beginning, it was something that we religiously did. Anytime that an appraisal did not seem to support the contract price, we would reach out to the agent and we would just say, hey, courtesy call, letting you know what's going on here. Can't go into detail, but is there information that you can help me out with that would be helpful to me moving forward? And I can tell you that those calls were typically anti-productive. And as a consequence, I went away from them for a while. And I can tell you that my experience, I would guess, for the most part, I didn't really ever hear from them. But when I did hear from them, they were probably more angry about us not calling them than they were about not coming in at the contract price, right? And it made me rethink things. And in consultation with others, I basically flip-flopped again. I went back to this process, if you will, of calling on everyone. And we do. I shouldn't say everyone. I would say most of them. There are a few exceptions, but for the most part, we do call. By the way, as a side note, I absolutely love the Veterans Administration's Tidewater process. Now, I'm not going to go into detail here. It's something that we have talked about on the podcast. Just go back and one word, just type in Tidewater. You'll come up with the episode and take a listen there as to what it is and how it's done. I love it. I wish every lender used that process because, number one, it avoids these angry phone calls. It avoids these unusual and uncomfortable conversations that we might have over the phone, but it still gets the purpose out there. It gives them an opportunity, if you will, to say, hey, you might have missed something, Mr. Appraiser. So before you turn this in, let me give you some data that you might want to consider. I absolutely love it. I wish that all the lenders out there would do it. But in the end, we have flip-flopped again, and we've gone back to making these phone calls. Now, I can tell you that my success rate is still about the way it was before. Typically, it's not that these realtors are happy to hear from us. Now, the market is very different now than it was before, and so I would say, if you're looking at pure numbers, and if you were to walk away saying, okay, that was a positive phone call or that was a negative phone call, I would say, again, most of these are still negative in overall, but I can tell you that the realtors they're expecting this more often than they were in the past. A lot of these buyers are coming in knowing that they are bidding more than the appraised value is going to come in. And as a consequence, it's not such a blow as it was in the past. So I think that's helpful. But I've also changed a bit the approach that I've taken with these calls, right? In the beginning, I was somewhat immature, inexperienced is probably a better term. And the approach that I took maybe was done so with a little bit of a chip on my shoulder, as if, hey, I know the value, you don't, but I'm calling you as a courtesy, you little peasant. Not that I certainly approached it that way, but maybe my attitude was a little less stellar than it should be. And that probably led to some, uncomfortable conversations. But I would say in at least today and moving forward, I've had enough experience with these phone calls that they typically go okay, right? Again, they're not usually amazing. They're not usually wonderful. They're not usually, boy, I'm so glad I made that phone call. But I can tell you for the most part that I think there is an understanding there that wasn't in the past. And somehow the approach that I take, and again, it's not something I can give you a step, say this, and then if they say this, say that. And if they say that, say this, right? It's just the approach of, hey, we're all on the same team. We are all professionals here. We all have clients in mind, and we have our built-in, duty to our clients. Listen, as a fellow real estate professional, I wanted to call you, let you know what's going on, give you an opportunity to give me some information. I'll tell you, folks, one of the things that it does, and I talked about this, I alluded to this before the break, that this is somewhat of a CYA. And I didn't really go into detail, but let me just briefly explain, if I may, what that means. Folks, when I turn this appraisal in, right, if I turn it in and I have not made that phone call, then almost inevitably, that realtor, those realtors, are going to look at me as the enemy, as if the person that killed the deal, right? But if I can have this conversation before the appraisal is turned in and say, I'm putting this back on, again, I'm not going to use these terms, but I'm putting this back on your shoulders. I've done what I possibly can do, but I am an open book. I am hoping that you can help me by giving me some information. Now, I can tell you most of the time they don't have information. Most of the time when they do have information, they ignore the sales that are almost model matches inside the neighborhood to go 3.5 miles away to another neighborhood that's superior, to other homes that are superior in quality / condition, and throw those at you and say, here, use these should help, right? And inevitably, they're going to give the price per square foot, answer to this thing. And by the way, if you want my take on price per square foot, go back and again, search in the archives for price per square foot, and you'll get my take on that. I'll just give you the Reader's Digest version that price per square foot for a home is like selling a car by the pound. Okay, let that sink in for just a little bit. I think it's a good analogy. But the bottom line is they go back to, let me give you a quick example. A couple weeks ago, I had a situation where I had a home, standard single family, single level with, half acre in a subdivision with a creek running through the back, right? Sales price was, let's call it 1.4 million. I could not find support over 1.3. And I reached out to the agent and she said, oh, I know this house is worth that. I've got all kinds of sales I can send you. No problem, blah, blah, blah. About an hour later on the email, she sent me 3 homes. And of course, her focus was cost per square foot, or price per square foot rather. And her number one sale, if you will, was a condo in town, and attached. Completely different house, but her explanation is, the cost per square foot on this thing is $236, and our subject is only $219 per square foot, and as a consequence, you should be able to use this and support the value, right? Okay, right. So now the question is, was this a counterproductive conversation on the phone? Maybe, but again, it's about CYA, and back to my point with CYA, 9 times out of 10, they either don't have data at all, or the data they know is also crap, right? And as a consequence, when you turn that data in the Tidewater situation in VA, you actually will address that. Hey, on such and such date, at such and such time, I reached out to the point of contact to indicate that this was a Tidewater situation. And, 12 hours later, they came back with these 3 sales, which I analyzed and did not use because of this reason, this reason, this reason, right? Again, CYA. You gave them an opportunity. They failed, if you will, in their duty to come up with the data that would support what it is that they need to support as far as the value goes, or as far as the cost or the price, right? And all of a sudden you have a little bit more coverage, a little bit more liability, rather than just turning it in and then being frustrated that they didn't get an opportunity to participate. Now, again, very, very important that you approach this in the right way. You are not reaching out to the realtor to get their comps. Okay, let me make that clear. You're not reaching out to the lender to say, or the realtor rather, to say, listen, I'm not coming up with the great comps. Give me some comps that I can use to support your value. No. You're reaching out to them as a courtesy to say, listen, I don't see support in the marketplace for your price, if you will, when it comes to value. And I'm giving you an opportunity to say, hey, Dustin, you might have missed something. But again, in the end, the appraiser is the analyst. The appraiser makes the decision on if sales are comps, right? They're not just comps because somebody gave them to you. By the way, as a side note, I often get active listings, pendings in there as well, as if, again, not that those can't be considered, but the value's got to come, of course, from typical sales. So these are the things that I'm dealing with. I would love to hear your feedback as well. Again, shout out to Stephen, hat tip to Stephen. Thank you for the question. Great. I would love to hear from you in the comments below as to what you do. Some suggestions that you might give us, a script, if you will, as you make these kind of calls, or maybe reasons you don't make these kind of calls. I would love to hear from you. Again, go to my website, theappraisercoach.com, and click on podcast. You can click on this episode, and you can comment as you can on any episode here at the Appraiser Coach Podcast. We'll catch you next time.
You've been listening to the Appraiser Coach Podcast with Dustin Harris. If you like what you hear, please give us a 5-star rating and post a short review on iTunes. For more in-depth insider information on how you can make more money as a real estate appraiser, visit theappraisercoach.com and sign up for the All-Star team today. Thanks for joining us. And now, get out there and create some value.
Without stepping over, of course, the bounds of confidentiality, without stepping over the bounds of, of what's sorry, editor.